Hey, what is up guys, and welcome to an in-depth review on A Way Out, a game unlike any other that seeks to bring the classic couch co-op experience back into the limelight by throwing you and a buddy into the troubled lives of Leo and Vincent as they seek to escape prison and get revenge on the man who put them there. Before we get into the details, it's important to note that A Way Out is an adventure that must be played with another person. It lacks any sort of matchmaking system, but if you have a dependable buddy to hop along for the ride, you'll be in for a completely unique experience, both visually and mechanically, that will keep you on the edge of your seat the whole way through. And to make things a little easier, only one person needs to buy this game, even if you choose to play online rather than locally. A design choice that's truly commendable in this day and age of companies milking gamers for as much money as possible. But with that said, it's time to dive in and find out what makes the game itself so enjoyable. So to start things off, let's jump into the visuals. Aesthetically, A Way Out is one of the most interesting games I've seen in ages. And in this case, that has very little to do with the level of detail or the quality of the textures, but rather the very stylistic way in which everything is presented to the player. For example, instead of taking the same old boring approach that games have been doing for years with regards to how the player's screens are split up, A Way Out goes the extra mile to ensure that even something this simple is completely dynamic. How the screen gets divided up can change drastically depending on what's happening in-game. For instance, encountering significant parts of the story will alter the screen space so that the focus is shifted primarily to what's important. You'll even run into some cases where the screen switches over entirely to one player, which helped make for one of the coolest chase sequences I've ever seen, let alone in gaming. Seriously, the virtual camera work here is phenomenal. Another element I really came to appreciate in A Way Out was the atmosphere. Whether you were trapped deep below the prison in the damp sewers, or were simply taking a stroll through the morning woods, the lighting looked fantastic. And speaking of those different locations, that's one of the other great things about this game. Despite the name, A Way Out is not just about escaping prison. It also allows for the story to take the player through an incredibly diverse array of locations. So, expect to explore anywhere from the concrete jungle to an actual muddy green one. And I gotta say, as much as I love the prison segment, the various open vistas, and the level of diversity always made for a nice change of scenery and kept the game feeling fresh at every turn. Character models were also really well done, and I especially loved how they did an excellent job at making sure everyone felt true to the time period. You know, you've got tons of guys and gals dressed up in bell-bottoms, and then there's dudes like Leo, rocking sideburns the size of a runway. This level of authenticity helped create a style that players will easily pick up on and recognize without the game ever having to come out and say that this is set in the late 70s. And to me, that was really cool. A Way Out also pays a huge amount of attention to the small details that decorate almost every inch of its world. And the real beauty lies in the fact that you can interact with so much of it. We'll talk a bit more about it once we get into the gameplay side of things, but in the end, the little stuff all adds up, and the sheer amount of detail really helps make each area feel genuinely well thought out and lived in. Overall, I very much enjoyed the look and feel of this game, and while there were a few odd animations and lousy textures here and there, this was the case where the good always far exceeded the bad. So with the visuals covered, let's move on to the gameplay. Right away, I want to make it abundantly clear that this game is a very cinematic experience. So if you're bothered by QuickTime events, or for whatever reason, don't care much for heavily story-driven games, this one might not be for you. However, if you know what you're getting into and you're okay with that, I think you'll be in for an awesome time exploring this world and discovering all of its unique and interesting features. While wandering around, you'll have the opportunity to stumble across all kinds of amusing activities that you can take part in, like trying to catch a fish,
not bad,
hitting some baseballs, or even a game of Connect 4.
Come on, man, your kid will be in high school before you finish this round.
Yeah, you better believe that one brought back some childhood memories. What's really cool is that if you do some of these at the right time, they'll actually sync up and create some really funny bits of dialogue, or even a full-blown song.
You ready? Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good. That's really good. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Apart from the countless activities, comes just as many, if not more, optional conversations. A Way Out is absolutely filled to the brim with these things, and what's even better is that they can vary quite a bit depending on which character chooses to interact with them. You'd be lucky to see this much interaction in an open world game, let alone a linear experience, and it goes hand in hand in making A Way Out feel like a living, breathing world, rather than some empty husk of a game. One of my other favorite aspects was that the devs weren't afraid to mix things up stylistically. One moment it might feel like an average over-the-shoulder action adventure, and then the next thing you know it would transition into feeling more like a top-down shooter, or even a side-scroller. Whatever the case, it always felt very creatively done and fit each scenario beautifully. Also, with regards to mixing things up, come the many different scenarios you'll find yourself in. Sure, much of the game revolves around Leo and Vincent walking around talking to strangers or looking for ways to calmly sneak out of certain situations. However, A Way Out also features several high-action chase sequences that the game does a great job at spreading out over time, with each one feeling vastly different from the last. So expect anything from car chases to cruising down a river in a rickety old raft.
Holy shit! Ah!
Another thing I really enjoyed about A Way Out, gameplay-wise, was that it didn't just choose to be a co-op experience for the hell of it. It took the idea of two people working together, and then made the most of it. And that really shines through in some of the more tricky situations, as the game gives each player meaningful tasks, like distracting a guard so that your buddy can grab a screwdriver, or sneaking your friend into an unauthorized area via laundry cart. And how you go about a lot of these situations is largely up to you, either via pure exploration and intuitive, or via the more in-your-face, split-decision moments, similar to the ones you might see in a game like Gears of War. Except with these, rather than solving your problems with guns and a chainsaw, you'll have to rely on your wits and creativity. Now, that's not to say you won't be slinging any lead downrange. Some situations do call for the use of firearms. It's just that while the more scripted fight scenes felt visually pleasing, the more open-ended and free-roaming combat ended up feeling very stiff. Luckily, the gunplay is only a small fraction of this game, so very rarely does it get in the way. Not to mention, there were a very few number of bugs, so with the exception of the two I encountered, A Way Out was essentially smooth sailing the entire way through. All in all, the gameplay in A Way Out was a breath of fresh air, and it was really cool seeing so many interesting details and mechanics packed into a more linear title like this one. And with that out of the way, let's check out the sound.
Hey, what? I'm sure you have good reasons to bust out of here, but I need to get out of here too.
Yeah? Not my problem.
And first and foremost, we'll start with the music. Tonally, A Way Out soundtrack was one that to me shared a very similar feeling to that of the more calm moments experienced throughout The Last of Us. Much of it was very guitar heavy and remained very dark and dismal at its core. And while it does occasionally pick up and feel a bit more like an action western or crime series, at times opting for a greater emphasis on electric tones, it always dialed it back to its darker foundation when things settled down. Overall, I really enjoyed the music, and I think it fit the setting as well as the events that transpired very well. In terms of the voice work, while the quality of the sound itself was really good, sometimes the way in which certain lines were spaced out and cut together felt a bit unnatural, and left the characters seeming a little robotic. However, I really only noticed this a few times early on, so I wouldn't say it takes too much away from the story in the grand scheme of things. And when it's all working well, you do get a great sense of emotion as the feeling of pain and misery radiates from Vincent and Leo's engaging discourse.
What about family? You got any?
Yeah. A wife. I hope. You?
Me too. And a kid. Alex. Fucking miss him, man.
And keeping on the topic of the voices, one thing that caught me by surprise was how well they handled the sound mixing, despite the fact that multiple conversations could be going on at any given moment. Very similar to the way in which the screens are split up, A Way Out does a great job at dynamically shifting the focus onto what's important, dampening any additional noises or conversations that might get in the way of what really matters. The guns also sounded exceptionally well.
Wow, impressive. Told ya.
In fact, this is one of the very few games I've played where rather than just featuring the initial blast, it also provides a realistic echo too. And in general, all the little details from the background noise emanating throughout a hospital to the smashing of metal did an awesome job at making the world feel alive and keeping you on edge during sequences like the car chase. As a bundle, A Way Out contains some excellent sound design with only a few hiccups here and there. And now, without mentioning any spoilers, that leads us into our final category, which is the story. A Way Out unfolds through a truly captivating story that takes place in the late 70s, following the Vietnam War. The game gets going after you and a buddy are thrown into the shoes of Leo, the short-tempered joker, and Vincent, the more rational and reserved thinker. Two unlikely allies who may actually have a lot more in common than meets the eye. As a duo, you'll not only look to escape prison, but also get revenge on the man who put you there. And together, each character's unique personality traits, like the fear of heights, lends itself perfectly to the different choices made throughout the story, such as whether or not you'd prefer to parachute into an area or trek miles through the jungle to get there. Despite a few flaws along the way, the game features some wonderful writing capable of both pulling at your heartstrings and making you laugh. The interesting dynamic all revolves around each of the main characters, seamlessly undergoing their own personal problems, all while simultaneously getting mixed up in the main conflict. They were both extremely easy to sympathize with, and together, they also provide a ton of hilarious and memorable banter. Structurally, the journey plays out through a 5-act story, with each act containing multiple chapters. And even though the game is somewhat short, almost every single step you take forward brings you to a new section that plays out drastically different from the last. To me, one of its only shortcomings arises in the beginning and middle of the final act, primarily due to its focus on the iffy gunplay we discussed earlier. But the ending, or endings I should say, turn out to be extremely satisfying and, in a sense, makes up for the minor missteps. All in all, it's a very refreshing adventure and easily has enough variation and choices to make for a fun second playthrough. With all of that said, it's time to give this game a final rating. For me, this has been one of my favorite games I've played in a while. At first, I thought it may just be due to the fact that it's been ages since I've had a good couch co-op experience like this. But after taking a while to think about it, A Way Out honestly is a phenomenal tribute to the good old days of sitting down next to a friend and enjoying an awesome co-op adventure. It's not perfect, and it's not for everyone out there, but for those looking for a good story-driven cinematic experience to sit down and play with a friend, this is a must-buy. It earns itself an 8 out of 10 in my book, and I commend the fact that EA of all companies let Hazelight Studios keep this a co-op only title that only needs to be purchased once by either you or a friend. Anyways guys, that just about wraps things up. So thanks for watching, hopefully you found this review to be helpful, and as always, I will see you in the next one.